So welcome back, and now in this video we are going to understand about auth0 a little bit. Auth0 uses auth protocol, which allows you to integrate a user management mechanism, user management service. You can say it can manage all your users through the database connections, and that will allow you to the login mechanism, and that will give you some access token, ID token with the refresh and all the different stuff. Okay, it's like authentication provider auth0 by Okta. Okay, so here what we are doing is we are going to populate a auth0 session data in the NextAuth. Okay, so let's say if this, when you are integrating it, this NextAuth is getting the access token from the auth0, then we need to manage it inside a session in such a way that I can access that access token and I can just call the external services passing that access token inside authorization header, because I need to show that I'm already logged in user, and that I can show only if I have the valid authorization header. Okay, so you can have a external APIs built with the Next.js, Express, Koa, Happy, or whatever the externals, external or some different language. You need to have this authorization header in the NextAuth session that you can forward and call the external service. This is what our target is. This is what we are trying to achieve. And here, first of all, what we will do is we will create an application. So this is my auth0 dashboard. So this dashboard, if you are looking at this for the first time, then it is nothing but either you can say at Google Developer Console, Twitter Developer Console. What Google Developer Console allows you is you create an application, then you can use the sign in. You can configure your own application, like you are building a product. You want to allow build a feature, log in with the Google. What you are doing, you need to provide a Google client ID and a secret, so that your application, your blah blah.com product, can start allowing users to log in with the Google. Because when you click on login with the Google, it's same this auth authorization mechanism starts. You need to give a consent, because your application is trying to access your Google information, like your username, email, and some publicly available properties, because you have given a consent. So it will access your profile information and it will store that in your database and allow user to log in, because it is also returning some access token or something. Same thing we are doing with auth0. In auth0 we are creating an application, we are creating users. So user already exists in some cases. When you do the login with the username password, this auth0, because on auth0 is same as the Google, and on auth0 you need to give a consent to your application when you are doing a login, that okay, I wanted to share my information to this application. So we need to create that application here. It is the same concept which is there on the Twitter Developer Console, GitHub Developer Console, Google Developer Console. You create a simple application, and when you integrate this, when the end user clicks on login with the Google, that Google will ask that end user, are you giving me the consent to share this information with this third-party application which is configured on the Google? If yes, okay, I will pass your information, and that will somehow generate access token for you. So this is what we need to follow. We need to create this regular web application, okay, not the native or mobile CLI application. I think, okay, so this is the regular web application, and here you can see this Next.js. I can see that clearly there. And what I will do is I will just delete this one, because I didn't create this setup properly. So I will create a Udemy v2, a new application, which is a regular web application, and I will call them it as a Udemy v2, and I will choose Next.js, because that will give me the instructions how to set up all these things. It has already created a client ID and a secret. You can see there is a domain, client ID, and a secret, and this is how you need to configure. We are using NextAuth, so this will be a little different. You don't need to go through all this information, but NextAuth underneath is also doing same kind of thing. Okay, so here we need to configure the origin, the logout URL, the callback URL, and all. So for the callback URL, you can just take the reference how it looks like. Web origin is localhost the port where you are running it, and allow logout URL should be the localhost 3000, and this is the callback URL. That is important. You need to configure this properly. API auth callback auth0. If you are doing something wrong here, the auth0 application will start throwing error because you are connecting this callback. Callback is nothing but this is the API route configured on the neck using NextAuth. So when you log in, you give a consent, it is going to feed the data to our Next.js API server to that particular route. Okay, so this is API auth callback auth0. You created a application, and then here once the application is created, we are going to copy the stuff. So here I just configured the logo and all these things. I already have a domain, and I will just use the client ID and a secret, and both these things are enabled. I mean, once you configure this client ID with your auth0 provider, you can log in with the either database username password, or you can also log in with the Gmail. Here these social providers we can add. We can even add the enterprise connections, like okay, log in with Azure ADFS or Azure AD or SAML SSO, and all these things we can configure in the enterprise connections. Okay, so this is pretty much we have created an application on auth0 portal, which will give us the client ID and secret that we need to configure with the NextAuth. So this is what we need to do. We need to pass the client ID, secret, and the issuer URL. Okay, so first we need to add the NextAuth in the PNPM dependencies. I added a NextAuth library, and I need to create this route. So these are like the basic steps how to configure NextAuth with the Next.js. The first thing it will ask you, okay, create this API route. Inside API, you need to create a auth. Inside that, create a NextAuth. So there is a spread operator inside the bracket nextauth.ts. Inside NextAuth folder, you can create a route.ts. And inside this, you will just define all the code like NextAuth options. It should be able to handle the get and post request. And we are going to create a NextAuth options inside a lib folder. So these are the NextAuth options, auth options, and then we are going to create a NextAuth provider, auth0 provider. So inside auth0 options, what we are passing session providers. So providers can be many, not even like auth0. You can have a Google provider, GitHub provider, auth0 provider, credential provider, and all those things. So I have configured a provider which is taking client ID, client secret, and issuer URL. And you can also specify the audience, ID token, and all. I will see what is required, because what is giving me the right set of data. Based on that, I will just clean this up. And this system, whatever I'm writing, that holds, that is also applicable. You will be doing the same thing with Airbnb clone. There we are going to create a Next.js and integrating NextAuth to the API route. So here we are adding the callbacks like session callback and JWT. So we are just writing auth0 options, like how this whole authentication with the NextAuth will work, like what all different information we are going to populate in the NextAuth session. So these callback decides that. So session, like whenever you are getting whenever you are trying to access the session, what session should hold post login. Like it should hold my access token and ID token and the JWT. So these two callbacks are important. That takes care of like what all properties you wanted to populate. So these are like standard callbacks which is provided by the NextAuth. So here I'm checking account. If account is there, then get the access token from the account and set it on the token and return the token. So same token can be used inside a session callback to access the session properties. So here this is the secret I'm using, NextAuth secret, and these are the callback, and this is the provider. Okay, so this is pretty much about the NextAuth options we have. And let me see if we are missing something, because I'm just using the reference to populate and to do all those things. So here we are just passing all these options. We are passing the secret, we are passing the using the session strategy JWT. Now what we can do is we need to populate your env, right? We already have a client ID and a client secret, right? We have created application on auth0 dashboard, and we have configured the callback URL, origin, and the logout URL. Now we need all these different options. I think there are 4 or 5 attributes we need to configure: auth0 issue, not NextAuth secret, and NextAuth URL. These are the standard ones. Okay, so that we need to configure and we need to get started, and let's see this in action in the next video. We just copy the client ID and a client secret.